So you want a controller that you can use on your Nintendo Switch that's comfortable, but can also be removed from the Switch and used wirelessly. Well, the Binbok Joy-Con controller may well be the thing you're looking for. Now, Binbok did send this controller to me for the purposes of this video, but I have not been instructed to say anything specifically, so all the opinions in this video are entirely my own. Now, the first thing you may be thinking is, haven't we seen a controller that looks a little bit like this before with these slightly larger than Joy-Con sized Joy-Cons? Well, you have, and in fact, I don't like to make too many direct comparisons within this video, but this is the Hori Split Pad Pro, and it looks very similar, right? It's a more comfortable Joy-Con that you can hold, which actually has a D-pad, and you can slide it onto your Nintendo Switch so that you can basically play things like fighting games much more comfortably than using things like the original Joy-Cons that come on the Nintendo Switch. However, when you take the Hori Split Pad Pro off the Nintendo Switch, you can't use it anymore because they're not wirelessly connected. As you can see, this Binbok controller is hooked up to my Nintendo Switch. I've got Splatoon running here, and as you can see, I'm totally able to control it using the wireless mode. So that's the main draw, in my opinion, of the Binbok Joy-Cons, but there's plenty more, so let's go ahead and go through the features that you get when you buy this controller. Essentially, they are Joy-Cons. They can be removed from this little dock that it comes with so that you can turn them into actual Joy-Cons, and you can use them wirelessly. You don't need this. This is just for convenience because it's more comfortable when playing games. But you get these two attachments, and you also get the main button features that you would expect on here. So L and R buttons, you've also got the ZL and ZR buttons, you've got twin analog sticks just like on normal Joy-Cons, you've got your normal face buttons, and you've also got a D-pad. Now this is where it's different to a normal Joy-Con, because on the original Switch Joy-Cons you don't get a D-pad, you just get these split buttons, which can make things like fighting games or any games that have sort of motion inputs, that can be quite difficult on a Joy-Con. But on the Binbok Joy-Cons, they've got a proper D-pad, and so that was one of the main things I was curious about, but this is not a fighting game controller. One more place that you'll find buttons on this controller, just like on the Hori Split Pad Pro, is on the back. You've actually got back buttons. Now, this doesn't add a new button to the controller. What it does is it lets you assign one of the other buttons to be doubled on the back. So you see this frequently on modern controllers and pro gaming controllers. Another way to make use of these extra fingers here on the back of the controller, but it doesn't actually add new buttons, just keep that in mind. There are two buttons here on the back, Assign and Turbo, and if you hold down the Assign button and press one of the other buttons on this controller, that will be the button that's duplicated here on the back. Apart from that, you've just got the usual suspects. You've got the minus button, the plus button, the home button, and the screenshot button. And when it comes to the feel of the buttons, I have to say, I actually quite like them. They don't feel like unresponsive or anything. They're not clicky, but they're not completely gummy. They're somewhere in the middle. They're on the softer side, I think. On the analog sticks, you do feel like you've got a lot more range of motion, a lot more height on these analog sticks, so that you feel like you've got a little bit more precision compared to the standard Joy-Cons, which are pretty low. They're designed to be as portable as possible. One of the things that concerns me mainly with these controllers is the D-pad, and I was like, I've got to try this out in some fighting games. And at first I thought, okay, not too bad. If I press on the diagonals, I get a diagonal out. When I press up, I get an up. When I press forward, I get forward. And when I do fireballs, I can do a fireball. But when I went to the first player side and I tried to do a fireball going the opposite direction, so down, down, right, right, I often found that I would miss the input. And the reason is when you go from like a circle motion input from down to right, here, it just sort of skips the diagonal input. Now, if you're very, very careful and you push really hard in all the directions, you can make sure that every input comes out. But with motion inputs, you're often doing them very, very quickly. And so you don't have the time to be pushing each and every single one consciously. You just need to do a nice swooping motion like this or swooping motion like this, and you need those inputs to come out. So in my opinion, this is already like a D-pad that I wouldn't really recommend for fighting games. However, if you're playing things like Tetris, where you're never really pressing diagonals, you're only pressing left and right or up and down, then honestly I found that it was totally fine. And outside of fighting games, the majority of video games used the analog sticks anyway, and to be honest, I was quite happy with the way that the analog sticks performed on this controller. So now that we've got that out of the way, that I probably wouldn't recommend this D-pad for use in fighting games, we can move on to the rest of the controller. Now, as you can see, the model that I've got is the translucent edition, and when you plug it into the sort of docking thing here, it actually looks really, really cool because you've also got these LED lights. So if I just hold the button here on the back and then press the analog stick in, I can cycle through the colors. We've got a yellow here, green, blue, a darker blue, purple, 4 different colors, red, and orange. And as you can see, you can have different color combinations here on the left and the right. So I've got like 4 different colors here on the left side, and a mode that I literally just discovered just now. By double clicking the stick in, you actually get it to cycle through all the different color options that it's got. So now it's moving, it's phasing in through green, and then that will phase out, and then it will phase in with a different color, blue. Now, the first thing you'll notice when you plug this thing into your Nintendo Switch, if you've been using the normal Joy-Cons that come with the Nintendo Switch, is that, wow, your sort of grip position for the Switch becomes much wider than what you're used to. It's just like, whoa, I'm used to holding my Switch like this, and now I have to like hold my hands a little bit further apart. But you get used to it, and especially if you've got like a chair with arms on it, you know, you can get used to playing like this. But keep in mind, playing on the Nintendo Switch with these controllers does make the whole thing even wider. And let's face it, the Switch was already quite a wide boy to start with. But instantly, when I plugged these Binbok Joy-Cons in, the first thing I thought was, wow, I really like the shape of this controller. Now, like I said, I don't want to make too many direct comparisons to other controllers, but the Hori split pad controller, one thing that I wasn't too keen on was the way that you kind of have to grip onto these grip things like with the tips of your fingers, because this bulbous part here is not actually that big, and so it doesn't really fill your palm if you've got fairly large hands. But these Binbok Joy-Cons, even though they're not super thick, they really do fill out the palm in a really reasonable way that it just feels so comfortable that you're less likely to accidentally press the back buttons. And I felt like that was one of the really nice things about the design of this particular controller. Now, this is the part of the controller that's a little bit frustrating. It is so comfortable that it now puts your thumb in a really good position to press the D-pad, because your thumb is now like a really good distance away when you're holding Joy-Cons like this. The only way to make this comfortable is to attach it onto something like this. You know, this comes with your Nintendo Switch, and what is it supposed to do? It's supposed to fill out your palm so that your thumb is the right distance away from all the controls. But it's so frustrating that the D-pad is just not what I would use for fighting games, because if I can't consistently get quarter circle motions out with this D-pad, then it's just not going to work out for fighting games. So it's like, so close. This controller feels really nice to hold, but the D-pad's just, I wouldn't use this. And so yeah, that's just such a shame, because I really like the feel of it. Now, one more thing about the controller, just in case I forget, is it also has rumble motors in them, and I don't think you have rumble in the Hori Split Pad Pro. Now, these rumble motors, you can also set the strength of them, so they've got like I think they've got 3 different settings, and the rumble works whether you're plugged into the Switch or you're playing it wirelessly, so that's a plus. All in all, if you're playing Switch games that use analog sticks predominantly for movement, I really like this controller. Plus, you have the benefit of vibration motors and the fact that it will work wirelessly even if you unplug it. But all controllers have their downsides, and it's time to go through a few of the things that I'm not so keen on the Binbok Joy-Cons. Now, the first one I've already talked about, which is the D-pad. Not super keen on the inability to do good quarter circle motions on here. Now, the second thing is I don't think it charges when it's plugged into the Switch. Normally, when you plug these blue Joy-Cons onto the Switch like this, these will also get charged by the battery in the Switch. But with the Binbok Joy-Cons, I left them plugged in all night long. I also plugged them in and left them in the dock, and they just did not charge at all. And I found the only way that I could get them to charge was to use the USB-C ports. So it does come with a USB-C charging cable, but only one, and you have to charge them separately. So you've got a USB-C port here on the left and a USB-C port on the right. Now finally, and this is probably the most drastic of the issues, is the slight lag that you get when you're playing with these controllers compared to the normal Joy-Cons. If you're playing a game like Splatoon, where you've got motion controls, you know, you can turn the controller like this, I just found that there was actually quite a bit more lag when you turn the controller. Now, obviously, when you hold it like this on a camera, it always looks laggier than it actually feels in real life. But I did some side-by-side comparisons, just running a camera recording at 60 frames per second, and it looks like on average the Binbok Joy-Con controllers are 5 frames slower than when you just use normal Joy-Cons. Now, if you've never heard about frame lag and all that, maybe 5 frames in a 60 frames per second game might not seem like very much. But I can assure you, even if you're not that sensitive to this sort of thing, I honestly don't usually look for this sort of thing, but I noticed it instantly when I plugged it in. I was just like, hey, when I'm playing multiplayer in Splatoon, I'm not able to use the motion aiming very quickly when I feel like it was faster when I just used the normal Joy-Cons. Now, I tested this both with the Joy-Cons wirelessly and plugged into the Switch directly, and the weirdest thing is that it's actually faster when you're playing this wirelessly, and when you're plugged into the controller, even the normal Joy-Cons, they were slower as well. But what makes absolutely no sense is why would the whole game be slower when you're plugged into the console with the Joy-Cons actually connected to the Switch? That I don't really understand. But again, that might not matter to you because probably 99% of the games that you play are just analog sticks and buttons, and you probably have no need for either the D-pad or motion controls. So to put everything in conclusion, here's what you get. A controller which is roughly $50 on average when you're looking on online shopping, and that's basically the same price that Hori asks for the Hori SplitPad Pro. However, I'm a much bigger fan of the D-pad on the Hori SplitPad Pro. So if you're playing fighting games and you're most likely not even using the analog stick for anything, then definitely I would go for the D-pad on the Hori SplitPad Pro. But if you want a set of Joy-Cons that makes your Nintendo Switch more comfortable to play when it's plugged in, also works wirelessly, has vibration motors, has separate LEDs on the left and the right side, also has a turbo function, also has the assign function to duplicate buttons here onto the back buttons, then honestly I feel like you can't go wrong with a controller like this. Now, one last small detail that I like to add is that although this is the Binbok Joy-Con controller that was sent to me, I actually got an email from a completely different company that had a very, very similar looking product. This is one of those designs that I think gets passed around between other companies, and I don't know what small tweaks they're making, but you can actually look around and there are other options that are very, very strikingly similar in shape. Is that relevant? Don't know, just wanted to point it out. Listen, that's all I've got for this review of the Binbok Joy-Con controller that was sent to me to make this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested to see more videos of other things gear related or Switch related or fighting game related or streaming related or any of those things, do be sure to subscribe to the channel. You can find me live streaming often with the gear that I review on this channel on my Twitch channel. You can also hang out on the NihongoGamer Discord. There's plenty of people on the Discord talking about gear that they've seen on the channel, stuff that they've bought, talking about games that they play, fighting games that they're learning, or even just showing stuff that they draw. And last but not least, you can find me on Twitter at NihongoGamer. That's all for this video. I'll see you all in the next one.